Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Buffalo Wings. We are closing in on the midway point of the 2047 season. We did our annual mid-season review, albeit a bit early in our past episode. And we're now getting ready for the first-year player draft. And we're also preparing for the trade deadline. Feel like perhaps shortstop is still a position that we'd like to be better at, and appreciate the ideas from Wesley Jones, Jackhammer Possessor, and DLL First Baseman 14 on how to approach both the draft and or the upcoming trade deadline. Although I think shortstop is probably the most obvious weakness for us to address. Being completely objective, we're still once again first in the National League in runs scored and first in the National League in runs allowed like we were a year ago. And we're second in defensive efficiency and first in zone rating overall. So although I think play at that position could overall be better, with a 53-20 record here on June 21st, it certainly has not sunk us thus far. So while I certainly hope over the next 3 or 4 weeks, as additional teams kind of fall out of the running, there may be some more interesting options on the trade block to help us in the infield, I don't necessarily view it as a critical need. So we will now turn our attention to the draft, and I noted some of the more interesting prospects at the end of the last episode. And now I'm confused here. Oh, we must be looking at OSA ratings, yes. I was like, how come there's highly regarded prospects around? And it's because we're looking at the OSA ratings. Eric Pineda is probably the most interesting of the 3.5-star everyday player prospects, like the high adaptability, work ethic, and intelligence. He's got some speed. He's got solid outfield range, although he's not particularly adept as a defender, but could definitely have plus contact, plus gap power, and really good at avoiding strikeouts. You combine that with an average-ish ability to hit home runs, and he could be a pretty interesting offensive player. With that speed and that gap power and that contact, he could be generating a Deshaun Seifu type level of extra base hits. So I like him. Number of other players that I highlighted last episode that I'm also interested in. Jesus Heredia, the shortstop, is another one who interests me. Somewhat similar profile, quite honestly, with the contact, gap power, and avoid strikeouts being the primary positive traits. Really good speed, decent base runner. And I do like about Heredia that he could play a number of infield positions. He's got the high adaptability and work ethic. I think I already mentioned that he's durable. He's not a gold glover anywhere by any stretch of the imagination. I think he's a second baseman or a third baseman. The third baseman, he'd like the arm a little better. The second baseman, he'd certainly like the turn double play rating to be significantly better than that. At least I would. In a perfect world, the range and error rating's better as well, but he's at least a really versatile player. So I'm hoping, and I haven't talked about that in this episode yet, but we've got this pick, and then we've got compensatory picks from the losses of our shortstop Essien and the outfielder Porter last year. So we have got 3 of the next 7 picks. I'm hoping potentially at least one of Pineda and Heredia will be around a few picks from now, because we are going to go in a different direction with our first pick. And that's to pick Ron Sedano, a 19-year-old right-handed pitcher. Durable, throws in the low to mid-90s, has the high work ethic we love to see, although he's not the smartest fellow in the world. Potential to have a 4, 5, or possibly only a 3-pitch arsenal. Most likely it'll be a 4-pitch arsenal, which should be fine given that the changeup is the hardest to develop, but we also think his ceiling on that pitch is the lowest of the 4 or 5 pitches he might have. Really good movement, really good control if he fully develops. But he's not, in my mind, a frontline starter. I think he's a back of the rotation type of starter. The reason I'm thinking about taking him and am going to take him is that he is a potential two-way player. And although his batting ratings don't measure up with the everyday players that we just talked about, he does potentially have excellent home run hitting power. And he's also a player who could play any position in the infield. Not necessarily at an all-star or a gold glove level, but I think that combination of a good, solid starting pitcher with someone who could certainly maybe play against lefties every day in the infield for you, or at least be a super utility guy that you're comfortable playing anywhere in the infield if you have some injuries or people need a day off, is a potentially interesting combination. He's a small righty, 5'11", 155. Hopefully he'll get a little bigger and a little stronger and throw a little harder. But I do like Sedano, and he is our scouting director's recommendation. Not looking for a ton of money, just looking for slot, which we have adeptly budgeted for. So we are going to go ahead and meet Sedano's demand for $3 million, draft him, and then we'll see who's available. We're going to have 2 picks in a row soon. Still a lot of interesting pitchers to think about. Taking a look at the batters, and Pineda is still around, and Heredia is still around. So we're going to scout out some more players and make sure that we're not being impetuous in our decision, but it's possible that the top of this draft will have worked out just about perfectly for us. And before we talk about our decisions here with our 2 supplemental picks, I just want to note that some of you have noted in the comment section to recent episodes, we're putting out episodes at a very rapid pace in recent days. I am trying to get as much of this series completed before OOTP 25 is out. I am definitely going to complete this season and 3 more after it in Buffalo, regardless of the timing, to get to the point where we'll find out whether Deshaun Seifu is a first ballot Hall of Famer. But just being realistic and honest, I know that once OOTP 25 is out, I'm going to be spending less time in this game and wanting to spend more time investigating the new version of this series. So that's part of the reason why I'm trying to go through the episodes a bit more quickly and fewer episodes in a season than I have historically have in Buffalo. Hopefully that's not causing anyone any consternation. But that's the explanation for what's going on. So if I put out an episode and you don't opine within the first 12 hours and there's another episode and you had some good ideas that I ended up ignoring because I had done the next episode before then, apologies in advance for that. We are going to go with Eric Pineda with our first pick. The personality is good. I think the bat could be interesting, like the speed, like the bunting ability. Not a perfect outfielder, again. He is someone who could eventually transition to first base at 6'3". He'd actually be a pretty solid first baseman with those ratings. So we are going to draft the great one. Always aggressive to take Wayne Gretzky's nickname. But we will go ahead. We're going to see the scouting director recommendation. We're still going to do what we suggest or what we want. He recommends Matt Diggs, outfielder, who does have some good home run power and ability to draw walks, solid defensively. Not much speed. We are going to go with Pineda here, though, and draft him. And then with our second pick, we are going to go with Jesus Heredia. Very similar hitting profile. Pretty similar speed, also has the high work ethic. He's durable, and as we talked about, pretty versatile defensively. So with the pitcher we picked up, who's a two-way guy, and Heredia, we are adding a couple of pretty interesting infield prospects into our farm system. And with our second round pick, our scouting director is still recommending Matt Diggs, who's still on the market. And I think this is pretty good value for him here. Left-handed hitter. He may end up just being a platoon guy, but you look at the potential contact, home run power, and eye. And if he ends up having favorable lefty-righty splits, he could be a pretty useful offensive player against right-handed pitching in particular. Competent in the outfield and can also play first base. He could play third in a pinch if we needed him to. Wouldn't be great defensively, but I think for a second round pick, the 6'5", 18-year-old is a very interesting prospect. Also looking for slot. So we are going to go ahead, meet his demand, and have drafted a fourth player. Our next pick is only the fourth round. We did lose a third rounder this year by virtue of our signing of Mr. Vidale to join our pitching staff, and Nehemiah Vidale has been excellent so far, so we're fine with that. Was hoping that there might be a couple of starting pitching prospects who dropped to this pick. I'll take a look and see if they're there. And in a draft where everything is coming up Millhouse so far for the Buffalo Wings, we do have one of the players I was hoping would fall to us in the fourth round available. Pitcher Mike Miles. When I first looked at his name, I thought it was Mike Mills, like the old REM bassist. But for a fourth round pick, I think he's pretty interesting. Durable left-hander, excellent stamina, potentially a really nice three-pitch arsenal. Now we're going to need that curveball to develop, but think he could certainly be a solid back end of the rotation starter. If things work perfectly, he could even be a pretty solid number 3 starter. So for a fourth rounder, I think he's a pretty interesting pick. Scouting director recommends we go with Kevin Seipert, a shortstop. Not quite as good as the infielders we picked earlier in the draft. If we were to go with a starting pitcher, our scout is actually aligned with us to go with Mr. Miles. So since we did save a little bit of money on our second pick, the center fielder, that will let us pay a little bit above slot, which is what Miles is demanding. Not a crazy demand, so we'll just go ahead and meet that. And onward to the fifth round. And here in the fifth round, starting to get to the less interesting prospects. We're going to go with Josh Duff, third baseman. Looks like a respectable batting profile, potentially borderline respectable defensive profile for a third baseman. Going to kind of require everything to work out perfectly for him to be a useful major leaguer, but stranger things have happened. And the draft is over. We didn't do anything too exciting or revolutionary in the last 15 rounds, so not worth discussing. So now the goal is to keep this team as healthy as possible, see what we've got over the next 3 or 4 weeks, find out how this team is looking at the All-Star break, and then dig into whether or not there are any trades that we will need to make to ensure that this Win Now team maximizes its opportunity to win now. And the post-week draft is now in the books. Arturo Casares, player of the week, hit 500 with 3 homers and 9 ribbies for the week. And he now has his batting average up over 300 on the season with a strong performance recently. We are still chugging along at 56 and 20 here as we head into the final week of June. And as we head into late June, the Buffalo Wings continue to dominate. 58 and 21 record, 12 games up on the Nationals, and we are up 9.5 on the Padres for the best record in all of baseball. So everything going well for the Buffalo Wings. Well, not everything anymore. A significant injury, our incredible stopper Floyd Auclair going to be out for 5 weeks because of a herniated disc. As long as he's healthy for the playoffs, and this doesn't become a major issue, that's fine. This could definitely derail his chances for a 5th consecutive year leading the league in games and holds. He did miss about 2 weeks last September with an injury and was still able to lead the league in both of those categories, even though he pitched about 10 or 15 innings less than normal. But being out for 5 weeks now probably will derail him from a 5th consecutive year leading the league in games and holds, as I mentioned, and probably means he won't end up being named to his 4th All-Star team either. And we've made it to the All-Star break. The season's still going swimmingly for the Buffalo Wings, 64-25, up 13.5 on the Nationals in the division. We are up 11 on the Padres for the best record in baseball. If we keep winning at this percentage, it'll be the 2nd most successful regular season in Buffalo Wings history, behind only our 118 win team from 2040. At the All-Star break, Riker is tied for 2nd in the National League with 24 homers and leading the National League with 76 ribbies. He led the league in both of those categories a season ago when he won the MVP award. Our new addition, Nehemiah Vidale, tied for 2nd in the National League with 11 wins and 2nd in the National League with a 2.47 ERA. He also ranks 3rd in the National League in pitcher WAR. So a couple of players having big-time seasons, and we'll take a look and see who actually made the All-Star team for us this year. Not a surprise to see Nehemiah Vidale on the list. Floyd Auclair, despite the injury, made the team. Our closer, Chris McClintock, made the team. And young reliever Chad Aguirre made the team. So 4 All-Stars on the pitching staff. Vidale, we talked about him already, 11-2 with a 2.47 ERA. He has been everything we could have hoped for as a frontline starter, named an All-Star for the 5th time. Floyd Auclair, named an All-Star now for the 4th time. Talked about him. He's on the IL, still about 3 weeks away from a return from that herniated disc. Chris McClintock, our closer, 4-1 with 23 saves and a ridiculous 0.25 ERA thus far this season. He's an All-Star for the 3rd time. You can see our former closer, Joe Scott, also named an All-Star. And then Chad Aguirre, another one of those high school pitchers we've invested in over the years, and in his first full season in the majors, he's got a 1.97 ERA over 50 1/3 innings. The young left-hander has an absolutely devastating fastball that he mixes in with a really good sinker and a solid changeup. So very tough on on batters. Interestingly, our first baseman not named to the All-Star team. So a year after winning an MVP award, and despite leading the National League in ribbies, Jim Reichert, for some reason, is not named to the National League All-Star team. Arturo Casares looks like he is the only position player named an All-Star for the Buffalo Wings. Casares won NL Player of the Week a week ago, as we talked about, hitting 300 on the year, 25 doubles, 21 homers, 60 runs scored, 66 ribbies, a 133 WRC plus, and a 3.2 WAR. So Casares, who last year was a Rookie of the Year, a Gold Glove winner, and an All-Star in his first Major League season, looking to add maybe a Gold Glove to that again this offseason. He's obviously not going to win a second Rookie of the Year award because that's impossible, but he could be becoming perennial Gold Glover since we have been playing him in left field, and he has really excelled in that position. So I'd say the biggest surprise is that Mr. Reichert was not named an all-star. Hopefully that will give him some fuel for the second half of the season. I mean, the batting average is only 257, but as I said, second in the National League in homers, leading the National League in ribbies with a 128 WRC plus year after leading the league in homers and ribbies and winning an MVP award. Kind of unprecedented for someone with that resume to not be named to the All-Star team, and hopefully it will make Mr. Reichert angry and fuel a big-time performance from him over the second half of this year. Check in on how our shortstops are doing. Juan Palomo, who's playing short against left-handed pitching, hitting 298, 105 WRC plus. The bat against lefties is not a problem with him. Honestly, the bat against righties for him is fine as well. He's just not an ideal defensive shortstop. In a perfect world, would like that range to be at least 5, if not 10 plus points higher. But he's a more than competent defensive shortstop. He conceivably could end up as our starting second baseman next year if we're unable to re-sign Ramiro Medina, who will be headed to free agency. The question is how Fuchs is doing. Fuchs has the batting average at 246, 85 WRC plus, a WAR of 0.6. He has been our starting shortstop against right-handed pitching. He does have the better infield range than Palomo, and you can see here he's better than Palomo in every category. Taking a look at the fielding stats, still slightly below average defensively for a shortstop, but not egregiously so, and it's still a reasonably small sample size, nothing to get too concerned about. I think I'm going to continue looking at who's available in the coming weeks as we get through the All-Star break and closer to the trade deadline. But I don't feel an incredible urgency to do something at short unless the perfect situation just kind of falls into our laps. And with only about $2.4 million to spend, the perfect situation is likely going to need to include the trading team keeping a decent chunk of that player's salary. And our Buffalo Wings have been playing even better baseball since the All-Star break. We sit here about a week and a half away from the trade deadline, and we have a .727 winning percentage, 72-27 through our first 99 games of the season, up 14 games on the Nationals for the NL East crown, and up 11 games on the Padres for the best record in baseball. So certainly not feeling like we need to be too aggressive in the trade market. Still ranked first in the National League in runs scored. Still ranked first in the National League in runs allowed. You can see we are literally the best team in every major pitching category in the National League, except for home runs allowed, where we rank third, and strikeouts, where we rank second. The defense still really good. The base running kind of average. The offense could definitely use a little bit of a boost. We're generally in the top 5 in most categories, although we kind of average in terms of the amount of walks we draw, and we're below average in terms of the frequency with which we strike out. But it's not a bad situation. Looking and checking in again on our shortstops, Juan Palomo hitting 302, 111 WRC plus. We've talked about him as a guy who only plays against left-handers. I think it's fine. Not great defensively. We'll take a look at his fielding stats this year, and he's a bit below average in terms of his zone rating and defensive efficiency at short, which is what we'd kind of expect given those ratings, but not completely inept at the position by any means. Josh Fuchs kind of doing what he's doing, hitting 239, playing primarily against righties, striking out about a third of the time, which is unfortunately what we'd expect with him, but the 82 WRC plus is not embarrassing, and he's now slightly above average defensively if you look at zone rating and defensive efficiency. So I wouldn't view it as a critical situation. If there's an opportunity for us to get better, we'll certainly investigate it, but I don't feel like it's something we have to overpay for. And we do have a deal that we're going to make. It's not really going to address the shortstop situation, but it's going to ultimately help our team. You may remember that we've had Kevin Griffith, who we traded for this past offseason, on the 26-man roster, kind of as the 26th man. He's been playing against left-handed pitchers for us, and he's hitting just .211 with 2 homers and 9 ribbies in 90 at-bats. Had him mainly on the team to have a second captain personality on top of what we have with our number 5 starter, Jim Coles. But he doesn't really bring much to the table defensively, and he's fragile physically, and he hasn't really hit. Doesn't necessarily have a profile that suggests he'd be a great hitter. But if we bundle him and Pat Keating together, who was a 7th-round pick 5 years ago, doesn't really look like a big-time prospect, 23-year-old who's spending his 3rd consecutive year in A-ball. If we package those two together, we can go get our old friend Arturo Flores. You may remember him. He was a guy who came up through our system, an international amateur free agent. Never really got a full-time opportunity to start with us, but he's gone on and with the Angels and the Yankees, hit a lot of home runs. And he also has a captain personality, so we'd still have a captain personality on our team. But he's durable, and he's got more pop in his bat, particularly against left-handed pitchers, which is where we'd be playing him as a designated hitter. So I think it's a little bit of an upgrade to our team offensively, gives us a proven veteran pinch hitter off the bench. He's been a below-average offensive player this year, but as we kind of talked about, the guy that he's replacing hasn't done much anyways offensively. And Flores, over the course of his major league career, has hit 287 homers, been a bit above average as an offensive player. I think playing him only against left-handed pitching, it's a small upgrade compared to what we have with Griffith at that position right now. And it does mean that we're kind of committed to running likely with the shortstops that we have. We still have over a week, time for an injury to happen and make us panic, or time for perhaps someone else to emerge who's available in the trade. But as far as a realistic option, this seems like a very small step that does improve our team. So we're going to go ahead and complete that trade. Players are disappointed in the lack of leadership by losing Griffith, but of course they're happy with the new leadership of Flores. So hopefully everything's that evens out there. And one correction on what I had just said. Griffin was actually playing first base because we had Reichert DHing against left-handed pitchers. So Flores, who's a little better defensively than Reichert, will be our first baseman and bat 7th against left-handed pitchers. Hopefully that helps extend the lineup there a little bit, get a little more offensive production out of that spot. And as I said, also gives us a somewhat proven pinch hitter off the bench for when we need him in playoff games, which will likely be closer than a lot of the games that we've been playing during the regular season this year. And another injury, although Claire is getting close to getting back from his, but Arturo Casares, a concussion while making a defensive play. The team doctors, of course, say that the concussion is minor and he should be back in the lineup within a week. We're not going to mess around. We still have a massive lead in the division of 12 games, even though we're not playing quite as well recently. It'll weaken the team a little bit, but we're going to throw Casares on the 10-game IL and ensure that he is hopefully fully recovered from that when we're making the final push for the playoffs in August and September. And we've got another trade that's been offered to us, and this is one that I think we may make. It could mean the end once we get through some injury issues of Flores being on the team. But our old outfielder, Juan Romero, was just offered to us in a trade. He still has a pretty interesting hitting profile. He's also a captain. Strikes out an insane amount of time, and he's been a below-average offensive player the last few years, but still has a batting profile that suggests it could be pretty useful as a guy coming off of our bench. He's not making much money. He's going to be a free agent after this year. And all that Nashville is looking for him in return is a pretty middling prospect, a 21-year-old starting pitcher, Juan Luis, international free agent signing from 2043. He's had a solid year for us as a starter in single-A marathon this year, but he's fragile physically and just don't think that his stuff and control are ever really going to measure up as a major leaguer. So I think we are going to go ahead and make that trade. Gives us another proven veteran bat. As I mentioned, probably going to have to make some decisions once Casares is ready to come back off of the IL. And it's possibly Flores, whose job could be in jeopardy, which kind of stinks, but it is what it is. We'll go with whoever we think is better. But it also gives us a little insurance if that concussion injury with Casares is more significant than we expect it to be. And we'll try to save a little money, as we always do. It looks like they're willing to retain his contract, which is fine. Not huge money, but would rather have them pay it than us pay it. So we get Juan Romero for free, basically, just like we got Flores for free. So if we do have to cut somebody, no harm, no foul. We'll go ahead and give them the young prospect Luis, bring Juan Romero over, and the trade is done. Fans are happy to have him back. Another leader on the team and a proven veteran bat. And what that does mean is that another veteran bat who we had just promoted when we put Casares on the list, Bobby Bolig, one-time, big-time offensive player for the Buffalo Wings, but he's really been kind of a OOTP nomad in the minor leagues most of the last several years. He was with Albany this year for us. We let him go after last season and then picked him up when all he was looking for was a minor league contract right at the end of spring training. He's done really well in Albany this year, but I think that Romero is better at this point. I don't know that Bolig doesn't have options, so we can't really just demote him anyways. So we are going to go ahead and waive and DFA Mr. Bolig to open up a roster spot for Mr. Romero. And we've made it to trade deadline day. We've been looking at the trade market. We've been looking at shortstops in general. And I just don't think there's anything that makes sense for us to do. You can see among the shortstops that are on the trade block, a lot of familiar names: Tegan Tiley, Alejandro Contreras, Steve Anderson, Toby Golston, players that we've had on our team in the past or looked at many times in the past. But don't think any of them are going to necessarily be a huge upgrade offensively. And I think it's clear that none of them are an upgrade defensively. So at this point, I think we're going to stick with what we've done. Brought back Flores and Ramiro with those trades, who hopefully will give our offense a little bit of a boost and give us a little bit of insurance if we have any injuries in the corner outfield, first base, DH type slots. But other than that, we're going to run with who we've got. There's some interesting pitchers out there, but our pitching is so good and so deep. I just don't think there's a need to go after anybody. 76-31 here on trade deadline day. still with a 12-game lead over the Nationals in the division. The surging Padres, who have won 7 in a row, are only 8 games behind us for the best record in baseball now, but we've still got a pretty good cushion on them, given that we're less than 60 games away from the end of the season at this point. And we've made it past the trade deadline now to August 1st. Our outstanding closer, Chris McClintock, pitcher of the month for July. 12 relief appearances, 9 saves, a 2-0 mark, and 17 strikeouts over 13 2/3 innings with no runs allowed. McClintock is having an historic season as a reliever, with a minuscule 0.19 ERA over the 47 innings that he has pitched thus far this season. The highest ERA he's had in the parts of 3 seasons he's been with us is 1.86 last year. So he has been a brilliant addition to our pitching staff. Speaking of brilliant additions to our pitching staff, Claire's been on a rehab assignment after missing 5 weeks. He's only pitched once in Albany, but it may be time to bring him up now that we've made it to August 1st. The guy that we had brought up for him, even though he's been up over a month at this point, you can tell that our manager apparently likes to go with more experienced and more proven people, because unfortunately Mike Jaramillo has pitched in just 2 games for us. He's been effective over an inning and 2/3. He's a guy who we picked up in a trade with the Giants closing in on 2 years ago. Go back on the history on that. I think I remember the trade. Yeah, that was the Joe Scott trade, when we traded Scott away to make room for McClintock as our closer. So Jaramillo, Uncle Nick, looks like he could be a useful player for us, gives us some insurance in the bullpen if we have some injuries. Part of the reason why we didn't need to make any trades, or didn't feel the need to make any trades as we get closer to the trade deadline, is that Jaramillo is going to be headed back to the minors with Mr. Claire coming back, and even with this brilliant pitching staff that we have together this year, one of these guys, most likely, at least based on performance right now, would be Joey Bills, isn't going to be on the playoff roster anyways. So we've got a little bit of redundancy at this point. So Jaramillo will be heading down to AAA. Floyd Auclair will be coming back to the majors. And we'll find out if we're able to hold on to the best record in baseball and clinch a 20th consecutive playoff appearance in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.